Why have a podcast? Well, let's explore that together. Can't all be movie stars and A-listers and Seth Rogens and whatever, right? So how do you break through? What if you're middle-aged and you still have something to share, but you don't know where to begin, and you're like, I'm not a celebrity. Nobody knows who the heck I am. I mean, people only know me in my local community, maybe my religious community, my social community.
Welcome to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, your gateway to becoming a thought leader in your field. Dive into the world of elite podcasting and master the art of influence and inspiration. And now, podcast personality, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Hey, podcast fans. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I'm Anne Scottlin, and today we're diving deep into the question that's on everyone's mind. Why should you have a podcast? What are the benefits? But before we do that, how has your week been? Would love to hear. Send in comments. Anything interesting, especially that happened to you this week. One of the highlights of my week was I went to San Francisco with a girlfriend and spent the night there so that we could go to a sound bath in Grace Cathedral. Grace Cathedral is an iconic, beautiful church there in San Francisco with incredible views of the sea and the bay. And they offer a 90-minute sound bath with traditional sound bath music. So that's not, say, organ music or choir necessarily, more just traditional sound bath music with singing bowls and the rainmaker and so many other amazing instruments. For 90 minutes, we all brought yoga mats. It was really quite wild, laying on a cathedral stone floor on a yoga mat, looking at the ceiling and meditating and listening to music. So I highly recommend it. It was an excellent experience, super rejuvenating. And they had also partnered with the Marina and Marine Biology Station in Monterey, California. So they had the latest, most high-tech recordings of whale and ocean sounds that they mixed into, which made it really different and fun. So share with me. Like to see what all of you are doing, getting to know you a little better as we keep talking about podcasts. And yes, today's episode is about unveiling the power of podcasting. Unveiling. There you go. Why have a podcast? Well, let's explore that together. But first, please comment and subscribe and shoot this link to someone you like, because they might enjoy listening to it too, hanging out with us here for a few minutes on Launch It. So the power of podcasting, let's jump right in. Well, one of the most obvious benefits of having a podcast, of course, is accessibility and convenience. And we know that the incredible advantages of being able to listen to a podcast or watch in this case, or whichever one you're doing at the moment here with mine, multi-platform, can be consumed anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter what kind of lifestyle you have. You can do it while you're working, before, after, at home, falling asleep, waking up. So many ways to consume the incredible content that podcasts offer. So we know that about the audience, about our listeners and viewers. But what about your schedule? Because this is where the rubber really meets the road with most people that I talk to. They're like, I don't have time. I move around a lot. I don't have a professional studio. Well, the good news is if you have the right team, you can also create podcasts anytime and almost anywhere. It might depend on your internet connection, but honestly, it can happen almost anytime, anywhere, and especially with the right team setting things up for you. I travel almost constantly. I guess by that I mean often weekly or more than once a week. I am on fairly significant trips, travel for business, for family, and mostly for business for myself, and traveling around the world. You often see me, most recently in Portugal. So one of the benefits of being able to do a podcast is that I don't have to go to where all of the listeners are. Public speaking is fantastic. I love it. And I really love being with each of you in person more than anything else in the world. But it just becomes preventative at some point to have the lifestyle you want and be able to do that. Going somewhere every week is just too much. So having the virtual opportunity of a podcast is phenomenal. Not only can you watch virtually, but you can also create virtually and literally from almost anywhere. So that's been a huge solution for me, shooting a podcast in Portugal. You just didn't know. So yes, it can be done. So this, to me, since we already know the benefit of the public consuming it at their leisure, the best part is that you can now basically create a podcast at your leisure with the right tools, with the right team. Another flexibility is you can create as much or as little as you want. If you're live streaming and you meet once a week, then you just need to make sure that your schedule can accommodate that. If you record, you can have almost any schedule for recording. I have my business partner with Metagagement, my other company, Dr. Lyman Montgomery. He can record 10 shows in a day. It still blows my mind. Like I lose my voice at that point, but he'll blow out basically a whole season of episodes in one long day. And then he just doesn't have to worry about them. They're banked. He has them ready to go whenever he wants to have them scheduled. And then some of you will do both, where you'll have a lot of lives and then some recorded when you don't have an alternative. You just can't. If the wedding of your brother is on the very day of your podcast streaming, you might have to have a pre-recorded one, right? So, but yeah, as far as Dr. Lyman Montgomery and my show, check out our podcast, Metagagement. I have multiple podcasts. You're just listening to one right now, which is my podcast about podcasts. Check out our podcast, Metagagement. You can check the notes here on whatever platform you're watching or listening to and find out the link. Come check us out. We stream on Fridays. That's at 11 Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And I think if I just took a stab at it, 4 p.m. GMT. Don't hold me to that. So what else is a benefit? Well, again, any person, any lifestyle, from someone who is a student and has limited podcast time or locations, or they change, they can have a podcast. Or a private wealth manager, right? A private wealth manager might be living in the locations of his wealthy clients for 2-3 weeks at a time, a month or two, depending on what he's working on. And he can also have an extraordinarily successful podcast because he can just do it from wherever he is. So again, just one of the super top benefits. So again, moving on, what are some of the other things that a podcast offers you? Well, as you know, because of my purpose of this podcast, which is helping you create a world-class podcast that helps make you a thought leader in your field, podcasts can help you build authority. They can help you build thought leadership. It can really position you as an expert in your field in a way that some other things can't. And sometimes we just don't know which thing will take off. Obviously, podcasts are one of those things that if you already have some notoriety or even a little bit, they can really launch you. Think of Tim Ferriss, right? As most of you know, he was the author of the 4-Hour Work Week and 4-Hour Body and 4-Hour Diet. No, that's not right. Cooking. He was already an accomplished author, right? An entrepreneur, bestseller. So he had an advantage, right? But it was his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, that significantly elevated his status as a thought leader in the self-improvement space. It basically made him a household name. It was the podcast that really did it for him. And of course, undeniably, love him, hate him, Joe Rogan. Now, he was already very famous, but not globally necessarily, not to the level he is now. And it was his podcast's success that really cemented his status as a thought leader in the realm of alternative media and, of course, long-form conversation. So he created a massive global following through his podcast, people who'd never heard of him before. But once he got on and created some noise, people came flocking, and I could name several other people with podcasts or shows that have done the same thing. Howard Stern, not a podcast, although he does now. Just so you can create a stir just from being easily accessible and having a message, controversial or otherwise, right? So far we have talked about two particular ways podcasts are better for you, better for your message, better for your business, if that's what you're using to promote on your podcast. Accessibility and convenience, those are huge. And then building authority and thought leadership. I could do a whole separate episode on this, and I probably will, how that works and how you can become more of a global influence in a way that does really position you at the top of your field. And then, of course, cementing your success if you already have some. Everyone whose resume has some positives that you already have going for you is going to have an advantage in a podcast. If you are already work in humanitarianism and are an expert in that field, having a humanitarian podcast with a specific niche is going to be more useful and is going to build up your authority in that space. If you are into animal rescue and rehabilitating animals, and you're already doing that, having a podcast in that space, you are already using the skills that you know. Maybe people already know you because you're part of a nonprofit organization or a global social entrepreneurship, right? So these are ways you go. If you have a book of any kind, famous or small, it gives you, again, sort of that dual-pronged approach to promoting your message. So before we go on, have you learned something so far today? Shoot me your messages. Tell me, have you learned something so far today? And what? I'm willing to have a sense of humor. Okay. And also, again, please comment, and please subscribe. I would love you to get notifications or just know. Help me boost the numbers as we grow this show and have a great time together here every week. So another point, 3, connecting with your audience. So engagement and feedback are a tremendous opportunity that podcasting offers you. Television, film, the space becomes a lot bigger. You have to go through agents and managers. There's a lot less of that intimate personal bonding experience that can happen with the craft of podcasting. Whether you have a huge team or you're solo, you can still develop relationships, authentic connections with people. And by doing that, they're going to tell more and you're going to foster more listeners, more viewers, right? And just that connection is tremendously rich. It's a richness to add to your own life as well. I mean, just knowing how you're creating impact, at least for me, is a huge positive. Knowing that you're helping solving people's problems, giving them great ideas and tools they didn't know existed, giving them encouragement, showing them how you learned the hard way so they didn't have to. It's wonderful. One of my dear actress friends from Hollywood from when I was there, Anusha, you can look her up. Just Google Anusha actress. She'll pop right up on there. Beautiful, extraordinary Persian actress that now based in Hollywood. She has a multi-branded business, including and not limited to her acting. And she had wrote a best-selling book in last couple of years that sold in Farsi throughout the world as a bestseller, a mega bestseller that was particularly about emotional wellness, meditation, and positive tools for creating a better life, more happiness, more peace, more calm, when the tools that people already had in parts of their lifestyle weren't fulfilling those things. Some of that seems extraordinarily normal in everyday Western culture now, but it wasn't in many of those cultures and many of the Eastern cultures. So it was a tremendous blessing to people to get that, to have that in their own language and have access to that. And they really connected to her. But it was when she had started her podcast, Joy Culture, which is in Farsi and also a version in English, but mostly the Farsi one. That is what solidified her and even helped solidify her career as an actress, was that enormous global attention she created from her show, from her book. And the stories she would share with me, she would just say, Anne, I just feel so humbled sometimes. I can't even go through the hundreds of thousands of comments I get, but, I'll catch the highlights, or, someone from my team will remind me to check, and someone will just pour out their heart to me and say, listen, I was a super depressed woman in Middle East in a very conservative household with a very young infant. I was very much isolated and alone. I had postpartum depression, severe depression. I was considering taking my own life. I felt so utterly, utterly isolated that I had no hope and I didn't know how to feel better. None of the tools, which were few that I'd ever been given, were helping me survive. My family wasn't there for me in the way I needed them. And when I heard your podcast in my language, sharing with me these really simple tools and practices to create better emotional health, it changed my life. You were literally instrumental in saving my life. I can't ever tell you how much I thank you. I'm getting emotional. And she told me, I cried when she told me the first time. I'm getting emotional again. That was one of hundreds and thousands of people that she's helped with her podcast. And just knowing that you are creating an impact, whether it's strictly for money, whether it's for humanitarian purposes, health, wellness, medical, communication, education. There's so many things you can do to help impact your world through a podcast and create relationships that feed your soul and sometimes literally turn into incredible friendships. Okay, let's move on. Another point of having a podcast. Why have it? You already have a book, perhaps. You already are known in magazines or in your I can't think right now, your career journal, your professional journals. Like, what is that? Yes. Maybe you're already a recognized author in the journals in your field, but you could still increase your global audience reach. So let me ask you a couple questions. Do you have a service or a product or a message that you think can help make the world a better place? Do you think that there are people who would really appreciate knowing about it if they could find you to find out about it? And if you were just more easily searchable and had an audio podcast, video podcast, or both, do you think that would help expand your message? In most cases, yes. And for many people, this global audience is a new phenomenon that podcast has created. We can't all be movie stars and A-listers and Seth Rogens and whatever, right? So how do you break through? What if you're middle-aged and you still have something to share, but you don't know where to begin, and you're like, I'm not a celebrity. Nobody knows who the heck I am. I mean, people only know me in my local community, maybe my religious community, my social community, and that's it. So many people have found a way to move from local to global influence through the medium of podcasting. The potential is incredible. You can have subtext, you can have transcribed, you can have subtext in different languages, whatever you find that is useful for your audience. And if you are multilingual, consider doing both in more than one language, because that really gives you an extra boost to create niches in the regions where that language is spoken. And you really have a much even greater chance to go global, but you don't have to. I am ashamed. I only speak one language fluently, and I've taken 3 or 4 other languages, and it's not my gift. And it's like, in my next life, dang it, I am going to speak 7 languages. Here's what I've learned about myself. I can learn languages on the street in the places which they are regularly spoken, but I don't learn them well from books. It could be that it's just my dyslexia. It could be many other things, but somehow, no matter how long I beat my head with them, they have a really hard time sticking. So I learn from experience. I'm a hands-on learner, but trying to learn languages from books has been really hard on me. So if you're multilingual at all, I'm so incredibly jealous and happy for you. So take advantage of it. If I could speak in some of the languages I'd studied, I would be doing podcasts in German and in French and in Greek and Spanish and whatever else, right? So find those ways to reach your audience with almost no effort, no extra effort, right? And even companies are using podcasts now. As far as the global audience, companies are really realizing how important and useful a podcast can be. Like eBay, right? eBay's podcast, Open for Business by eBay, which basically just highlights entrepreneurship and stories of entrepreneurship and motivation for aspiring business owners and sellers who are likely to use eBay. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute, as in your niche and who you're creating your show for. And the statistics are very encouraging. I mean, the growth, even since like 2021 in the post-COVID environment, podcasts have skyrocketed. I think according to Statista, when I looked it up, there were 2.3 million active podcasts globally. That's active, not just ones that have started and stopped and died or passed away. Active, 2.3 million. And then, of course, tens of millions of episodes from those podcasts. So this really reinforces how popular the influences of podcasts are as a preferred form of entertainment for many, many people, of education for many, many people, for just information sharing for many, many people, as well as, well, all of them. I mean, most fall into those three categories: entertainment, I think, education, and information sharing. There are plenty more, but people are just making it more and more a part of their lifestyle. Well, that probably brings up a question for some of you, and actually for one of our viewers. So I'm going to read that now. With so many podcasts out there, what's the point? Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. The fact that there are so many podcasts out there, that is the point. Niche podcasts to specific avatars. Avatar means your target audience, someone who's very specifically spelled out. You know exactly who that ideal audience is. That doesn't mean everyone in your audience has to be that, but your avatar means in marketing the primary target person. You know, it could be professional men in their 50s. It could be single moms in their early 20s. It could be college students. There's just very, very specific. And more than that, single moms in their 20s who are diabetic. I mean, just taking that niche, dialing it in one more time. College students who are not in their country of birth and learning English as a second language. Boom, boom, right? So the beauty of that there are so many podcasts out there means that a lot of people aren't going to understand that they need to niche and get more specific, and that it's honestly quite easy. You can become more popular by having, I'm sorry, something just went across my screen. It's very distracting. You can become more popular by having, let's just say, 10,000 really good followers who are very specific to your niche, or having 1 million followers, that's a lot, who are just anybody that may never purchase or use your product or services or participate in what it is that you're trying to teach and present. So niching out is very important. A lot of people get really overwhelmed around that. It's not overwhelming. I've coached many people through it. It's very, very fun, honestly, to niche out. And it really makes your audience be the actual people that are going to respond to your call to action. And if you're selling a product or service, those are the people that are most likely to buy it. Again, 10,000 people who will take an action as opposed to 1 million people who won't. It's not just a numbers game anymore. There is a whole warped perspective out there around the numbers in social media and YouTube and podcasting and views. Now, views are views. There are very different kind of views, and they're weighted very differently. So it really counts who is watching, and have you targeted your audience so specifically that you have captured that audience. You have become a thought leader in that field or subfield. It's totally doable. So more to talk about that. Gosh, we're already running out of time. I'm going to tell you about one more thing. Reasons for podcasting. Why should you have a podcast? Personal and professional growth. I mean, just developing your own communication skills. I'll talk about more of this another time. Learning, it's going to make you a better speaker. It's going to make you a better organizer, presenter, writer, literally all of the above. Just all of good communication, learning to carry on dialogue, written or otherwise, with your viewers and listeners. It's great at developing your own communication skills and helping others to do that as well. And and even just creating relationships. And I already talked about this. Like Anusha was one of my examples where there was an impact. But I can tell you where guests that I've had on my podcast, people who have connected to me through my podcast or been referred to my podcast, who reached out. Some of these people not only have gone on to become some of my dearest friends, professional friends, but also people that I've had on my show, they've had on their show. There's just a real abundant way to create relationships. It's harder. I have a book. I'm a best-selling author. It's harder to create those relationships dynamically with your book consumers, with the people who buy your book. It's possible. There are avenues to do it, but there's something physically removed about it. And because podcasting is a digital tool, you have that advantage of, responding within the same day or reacting in real time, live streaming. There's so many ways to really connect to people in a real and personal way. And, if they're just reading your book and they think of a question and they're like, I should email that in, probably just go to their publisher. They'll probably never get it. What's the point? Forget it. And they just go on, right? Whereas if you're watching or listening, you can literally put your question in the comments right then and there. Or if it's pre-recorded, you can shoot it off to their email or go to their website. So you can really stay in touch with people. Okay, well, this episode just flew. We have talked about unveiling the power of podcasting. Why have a podcast? And I'm just going to review real quickly the key benefits that we talked about today. And there's so many more, but these are all I can fit in today. Accessibility, convenience, building authority and thought leadership, connecting to your audience, building relationships. All of these things are huge reasons to have a podcast. And I was just going to say, what is a takeaway you have had today from the show? If you could think of one thing that you learned today or one takeaway that was a great reminder to you, shoot me a message. Would love to hear it. Or and place a comment right here. You can also go to the website, annescottlin.com. You can shoot me an email. My email address is listed there. And please comment and subscribe right here on the platform that you're following. Whether you're watching or listening, I really appreciate your help with that. Building this out in this first season of the show is going to be really important. And I appreciate all of you who are helping me do that. So, and consider the power of starting your own podcast. Think about it seriously. You may have done it already and you're just getting new tips and tricks here, listening to me talk on this show, or maybe you're still thinking about it or weighing the pros and cons. Let me know if I can help and really realize the implications and power of having your own podcast, which, I didn't even mention that. I was going to talk about my podcast, Global Socialpreneurs. So we'll do that for another day, but having a global impact on positive movements, on social entrepreneurship or non-for-profit organizations, humanitarianism, there's so many things you can do a podcast on. It doesn't just have to be directly for your business, but it can be. So what else? My next episode. Okay, so there's a glaring omission in today's episode, if you noticed. We didn't talk about monetization at all. It was in my notes, and then I said, nope, this is a whole separate episode. So the very next episode is going to be on monetizing your podcast. That's often the first question I get from people. How do you monetize a podcast? Maybe that's not always the point for some of you. That may just be a byproduct or something nice that happens. Others of you will say, well, after a certain amount of time, I will have to monetize the podcast to make the time and financial investment worth it. But others, already have monetization or sponsorship, whether it's through private organizations or corporate funds or a million other ways. So next time, we're going to talk about monetizing your podcast. Until then, please send me your questions. I really want to hear more of your questions so I can pull from them to pick topics that you really want to hear right here on the show. You can email me, contact@annescottlin.com. There, I actually gave it to you. You don't even have to go to the website now, but you should go to the website anyway. Let's come back and meet each other again next week. We're always streaming live. That's Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, 5 p.m. GMT. And the same link that it was live, the episode, you can always share that with someone else or save it for yourself because the episode will always be available after that at that same URL. Thank you for joining me today. As always, wonderful to get to know you and meet you. Thanks for sharing your time with me here on Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I'll see you next time. Cheers.